I've loved Chromebooks for a number of years, no, truly. Because while I typically use Windows devices and more recently a MacBook, I really appreciate how simple Chromebooks could be at achieving very, very fast performance in a number of subtasks. And if generally those subtasks are what you need, then a Chromebook can be perfect for you. I've turned a lot of people over to Chromebooks over the past couple of years because they don't need to be able to edit photos or edit videos or work in a Word document. They can generally use web apps for most of the stuff they do, which is great. But for me, I sometimes need that extra bit of horsepower and I want a premium experience. So I've been looking into a number of Chromebooks to see if I can get that sort of solution. So this is the Asus 2-in-1. It's a C433, I believe, which is kind of a mid-range Chromebook with a couple premium features to set it apart from the pack. And it's a decent machine, but after the last couple of weeks of using it, would I recommend it to anyone else looking for a premium Chromebook? Let's talk about it. This is an OISO, and this is the Asus 2-in-1 Chromebook review. While I typically start laptop reviews with covering the design, let's start with instead what makes a Chromebook in the software. See, Chrome OS is quite different from Mac OS or Windows in that there's kind of a continuous upgrade cycle rather than the same sort of annual or biannual release that we get with Windows and Mac OS. Now, that's not a bad thing. It means that you continue to get more features that you wouldn't expect. And since Chrome OS typically has had kind of fewer features as a desktop operating system, it really seems to be catching up every single year. What really seems to be coming together with Chrome OS is its interactions with Android. If you have an Android or a Pixel device, chances are a Chromebook will complement it really well with automatic login or sharing notifications or app sync or anything like that. You can generally get a similar Android experience on a bigger screen. Now, notably, Chrome OS does have support for running full Android applications, and if you are particularly interested in running phone applications on your laptop, then this is probably the best solution that we've seen so far. Because Mac OS still seems to be missing a whole bunch of apps from the iOS store, and Windows 11 is still waiting on an upgrade in order to get support for Android applications through the Amazon store. Now, generally, for me, I only have a couple applications that I consistently want to run through Android. Otherwise, since I'm running a desktop operating system, I generally can access those applications through their own web apps. But even then, there's going to be some sacrifices that you are making in going with Chrome OS over a desktop operating system. If, like me, you see yourself as a power user, then unfortunately you're not going to have hotkey shortcuts in OneNote, or you're going to have to use the kind of downgraded version of Office on web or the web apps rather than using the desktop version of Office. Outside of that, the experience, like I said, is generally getting to the point where it's kind of consistent with the experience on Android. The Bluetooth experience and notifications and generally the entire settings menu looks like it was ported over directly from Android, which, if you're already familiar with Android, is a really good thing. And I think for the average person that isn't familiar with desktop operating systems, they should be able to navigate Chrome OS just fine. The problem lies instead in kind of customization. Unfortunately, Chrome OS has a significantly smaller set of settings that you can set. Unlike a Windows device where you can basically change everything in the registry if you wanted to, Chrome OS seems to be significantly more locked down. So if you want kind of more obscure features, unfortunately, it's going to be tougher to achieve. An example I'll give are sleep settings, which are significantly hamstrung relative to what you might get on Windows as far as your different optionality goes. Where the story really changes is the fact that you can run full Linux on a Chromebook, so however you want to customize it, you can go for it. But generally, I see that as kind of pushing towards the far end of the super user or a power user spectrum, where I'm kind of somewhere in between. Like for me, I'm not very good with Linux. I'm still trying to learn it in many ways. And generally, I prefer having a little bit more customization without having to learn a completely new operating system. But maybe for you, that's going to be an easier process. But with that, let's get to the laptop itself. Now, this laptop is pretty okay when it comes to this performance. Now, this has a Core M3 8th generation processor, which is perfectly fast enough to run Linux, and it's got 4 gigs of RAM. Now, in most cases, I would say just for Chromebooks, 4 gigs of RAM shouldn't be enough. But a lot has changed in the last year. Notably, when you are specifically on video calls, it is very tasking on just about any computer. And as a result, 4 gigs of RAM and a Core M3 8th generation processor might actually start to sweat under the weight of a full video chat. I specifically run Google Meet, Google Sheets, and Google Slides all at the same time, and notably it was on a Windows laptop with 16 gigs of RAM, and it still seems to kind of struggle under the weight of all those applications. And on a Chromebook, I've really noticed the difference, where if I try to have video chats, I see it starting to kind of chug along. And so for that reason, while previously I would have said 4 gigs of RAM and a Core M3 8th generation is fine on a Chromebook, things have really started to change with work and school from home. As a result, I'd highly recommend that you probably go for 8 gigs of RAM, if not more, when you're looking for a Chromebook yourself, just to be prepared for the future. And then let's talk about the rest of the laptop. In terms of design, the Asus Chromebook C433 is relatively good. It is very mid-range in that, yes, it has a metal design, and yes, it is generally more premium than your average Chromebook, but I wouldn't set it too far apart from your average metal Dell Inspiron that you might get for $500 or $600. While on paper, a metal chassis and small bezels and a fully glass display sounds like they're super premium, in person, it seems just kind of okay. The design doesn't really strike me as super premium in that the keyboard deck itself is significantly lighter than the display itself. As a result, it feels quite unbalanced. So if you set it on your lap at an angle, chances are the screen will flip backwards, which has always kind of marked a non-perfect laptop for me. Of course, you can flip it all the way around because it is a 2-in-1 device, but I really wouldn't want to do it myself too often because it is relatively heavy for what the size is. It is a 14-inch display, so this isn't a tiny little 13-inch. It is not as compact as many other devices, but thankfully it does have small enough bezels that the footprint is quite small and probably comparable to a 13-inch from a few years ago. Head on, the 14-inch 1080p screen looks quite good. It gets bright enough, at least in indoor environments, but unfortunately the kind of glossy finish leaves a lot of glare and fingerprints if you decide to be touching the screen a lot. While it's still a good display in that it's going to be great for watching YouTube or doing spreadsheet work, for example, in Google Sheets, I generally wouldn't want to use this as my primary laptop for a longer period of time as compared to many of the more premium laptops that I typically use. When it comes to the trackpad and the keyboard, the trackpad is all in all quite good. It is big for the size of the laptop, it's smooth, it's responsive, and the click feels really nice and it distributes all the way across the body. But the keyboard, unfortunately, is not nearly as good. The first problem that I have with the keyboard is that it's silver, meaning that it has the exact same color as the chassis or the keyboard deck itself. And just staring at it right now, I can't tell you what the keys all say because they are the same color. I don't know why this is such a common design, but I'd find that if the font of the keys was black, then it'd be a better solution, or the backlights of the keys got brighter. Notably, even with the keys at full brightness, it really doesn't feel like I could see the full legend. And my problems with the keyboard, unfortunately, don't end there. The keys feel very, very meh. Like you're pushing down and you get through a lot of travel before you actually feel any sort of resistance right before the actual actuation, which means that it's not a very comfortable keystroke. It feels kind of squishy and not very tactile. Now, generally this is a personal opinion, so you might feel quite differently, but I found that most keyboards, this is probably in the lower 25th percentile of keyboards that I've tried in the last couple of years. Then, as far as the layout goes, if you are not familiar with the Chromebook keyboard layout, then you'll have to get familiar. Because while there is some keyboard customization in that you can change the function keys to true F keys, you can change the search key to be a true caps lock key, it's a little bit limited and you have fewer keys on the keyboard relative to a typical Windows laptop. And so just keep that in mind if you are particularly familiar with certain shortcuts. Notably, what I found is that shortcuts in many applications, many web applications like Google Sheets, are different between Chromebooks and Windows laptops. So even though I had gotten familiar with all of the keyboard shortcuts in Google Sheets, I had to kind of switch them as soon as I switched over to the Chromebook. One redeeming quality of this device is the fact that it has a USB-A port on the left side, USB-C ports for charging and data on either side, and an SD card, micro SD card reader, which means if you want to use it for offloading photos, then it's going to be a great device. But for me, I don't typically use this for photo editing, so I didn't find myself using the SD card reader too often. I'm also not the biggest fan of Chrome OS's Files app. It's more difficult for me to manage files than where I would on macOS or Windows. While this laptop had all the markings to be a fully premium Chromebook, I think it really falls short. That's not to say there aren't premium Chromebooks out there, I just don't think this is the one for me. I'm going to be looking for more, and there's a couple others that I've got my eye on, so keep an eye on the channel if you're interested in seeing more Chromebook reviews. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Let me know down in the comments what you think about the Asus Chromebook 2-in-1. Thank you for watching InnoISO. I hope you liked it, and I'll catch you in the next one.